The VapePassion Show, episode 26. Alright, welcome back to the show. So this is episode 26. I'm recording this on Saturday night, July 23rd. I'm feeling good and I'm ready to talk about some news. So I don't have any new products in, but I have done quite a few reviews actually lately. I haven't published them yet, but I've got them recorded and edited. I just need to get them scheduled on YouTube. So I should be getting those up pretty soon, and then I can start pushing out a lot more content regularly. Also, I mentioned this in a show before, but my iPhone 5 broke, and that's because the battery expanded. It's a lithium battery, and it expanded to the point of where it was unsafe to use. Like, I thought it was going to explode eventually. I mean, it was like cracking open. It was crazy. Well, anyway, I bought a new battery, and I replaced it, but then the screen wasn't working anymore because the battery had expanded so much that it bent the screen. So the touchscreen didn't work. I finally, after, 6 months maybe, I finally got a new screen for it. In the meantime, I was using my wife's old iPhone 4, which is terrible. But anyway, I finally got a new screen. I replaced it last night. So now I have a phone that has an actual nice looking camera, so I can start using it again for things like Vine and Instagram. I should be a lot more active on social media from now on, because that's where I usually do all my social media stuff, or where I have in the past was on my phone. And I can also read more articles and be more efficient with this weekly show. That's nothing you would have noticed, but that's something that's going to help me moving forward. So I'm really excited to finally have a nice phone again. So yeah, if you've been following me on Instagram or Pinterest, I'm sorry for the lack of updates, but hopefully that's going to change moving forward. So if you're not subscribed to those channels, make sure you are, and you'll start seeing some of the stuff I'm doing. All right, so let's just jump right into it with some advocacy, regulations, laws, and stuff like that. So the first article I want to talk about here is on Michael Siegel's blog. He's titled the article, Altria urges changes in the FDA e-cigarette regulations that would decrease its share of the vaping market and help save many smaller manufacturers. So if you don't know who Altria is, they are big tobacco, but they also make some vaping products like the Mark 10 e-cigarettes. So they submitted comments to the FDA blasting their pre-market tobacco application process for e-cigarettes, arguing that the requirements are unduly burdensome, unnecessary, and beyond the scope of the agency's jurisdiction under the Tobacco Control Act. In these comments, Altria expressed particular concern that the PMTA requirements will force many manufacturers out of business, undermining the Tobacco Control Act's public health goals. And they also noted that the FDA themselves acknowledged that a large number of e-cigarette companies will go out of business, yet they failed to account for this in their regulatory impact analysis. So Altria suggests that the agency should establish baseline performance standards for ENDS products, ENDS meaning electronic nicotine delivery systems, that when met would serve as the basis for an abbreviated or alternative marketing authorization pathway to satisfy the statutory PMTA requirements. So in these comments, Altria's main goals are to support manufacturers' efforts to develop and bring to market innovative products that may advance the public health, and to allow the industry participants to engage and compete in a dynamic market. So Dr. Siegel goes on to provide his own opinion on this, and he says that the truth is that these are not your father's cigarettes, talking about Altria and Philip Reynolds American. What they're doing with vaping products is nothing like what they used to do with the marketing of tobacco cigarettes. And that Altria and Reynolds American are not offering youth-friendly flavors like bubblegum, cotton candy, and gummy bear. Their marketing is not targeted at youth, and the sale practices for products like Vuse and Mark 10 are not directed at facilitating the youth purchase of these products. He says, to be sure, there are a small number of bad actors in the e-cigarette industry, but Altria and Reynolds American are not among them. And he also points out that we need to recognize that these comments from Altria are not a publicity ploy, because the company isn't even publicizing them. He wasn't even able to find them online anywhere. And what's interesting is that Altria is supporting policy changes that aren't in their best financial interests. They could easily just sit by quietly and enjoy a large share of the vaping market, a majority share, but that's not what they're doing. They're actually trying to save at least some vitality in the e-cigarette and vaping market by urging the FDA to weaken the burdensome requirements so that more manufacturers have an opportunity to stay in the market. And both of these two tobacco companies are also strongly behind the Bishop-Cole Amendment, which would grandfather existing vaping products. So Dr. Siegel, he does say here that he's not arguing that financial incentives don't play a role, because they do, the companies see an eventual decline in the use of combustible tobacco products in the US, and they want to be able to derive some economic benefit. And yeah, their market share won't be nearly as high, but in a robust, thriving vaping market, the overall market will likely be much greater if there are a large variety of alternative choices. So I think we all like to hate on big tobacco because they got us on these products that will eventually kill us. But it sounds like what Altria is doing here is pretty good for the vaping industry. Okay, now the next article I want to talk about is another one from Dr. Siegel's blog. This one is titled FDA Botched Cost-Benefit Analysis of its E-Cigarette Deeming Regulations. So Nicopure Labs, they released their declaration of what's going on in their lawsuit, and after reviewing that declaration, Dr. Siegel concluded that the FDA completely botched its cost-benefit analysis of the e-cigarette deeming regulations, drastically underestimating the cost of regulations and without even attempting to quantify its benefits. And he believes that this represents a violation of the Administrative Procedures Act, providing strong grounds for the DC District Court to overturn those regulations. So in that declaration, Nicopure revealed that they have 2,400 items, including e-liquids, vaporizers, and component parts. So in order to keep those products on the market, Nicopure would have 2 years to complete 2,400 pre-market tobacco applications, each of which is estimated by the FDA itself to cost approximately $300,000 and to require 1,500 hours to complete. As a lot of us have found out already by now, that $300,000 estimate is pretty low. It's likely more upwards closer to $1 million per application. But anyway, even if you use the FDA's more conservative estimate, that would cost Nicopure $720 million to keep its products on the market. And Nicopure, they're one of the biggest vaping businesses in the vaping industry, and they estimate that at that cost, they would only be able to complete maybe 12 PMTAs for their products. So Dr. Siegel, he points out that the FDA estimated that it would receive only 750 PMTAs. So one of two things must have occurred. One, the FDA grossly underestimated the number of regulated products on the market, because apparently they thought there were only 750 products, when we can see just from one company alone, Nicopure, that they alone have 2,400 different products. So they didn't even come close. Or number two, the FDA assumed that most companies would go out of business and therefore not submit any PMTAs. So it could be that the FDA did have an accurate idea of the number of companies and products on the market, but they assumed that the overwhelming majority of these companies would not bother to submit PMTAs because of the prohibitive expense and would therefore go out of business. Either way, it seems clear that the FDA failed to conduct a proper cost-benefit analysis and therefore violated the Administrative Procedure Act, providing strong grounds for the DC District Court to overturn the deeming regulations. I have a feeling that's going to play a really big part in those lawsuits. All right, and then in some more good news, I see here on CeviaUSA.org that they have joined forces with the Vapor Technology Association. So on July 11th, they announced their partnership with the VTA, and the VTA, they're another pro-vaping organization who is promoting entrepreneurship, responsible public policies, and a high standard of safety for the vapor industry, according to their website. So the original objectives of Sevia USA was to secure the affordability and accessibility of vaping products, and Dimitris Agrafiotis, the executive director of Sevia USA, has stated that the VTA has the tools necessary to provide effective advocacy for our industry in the United States, and they're excited to support their efforts. So more really good news there. It's really good to see all of these pro-vaping organizations, coming together and joining forces and combining their resources and pulling their money together to really make an impact on fighting these deeming regulations. All right, and now the next one I want to talk about is another one from Michael Siegel. He's really been in the news a lot lately. This one is a post he published on bu.edu. So this is Boston University's website. This one is titled POV, New FDA Regulations on Vaping Products a Failure. They do not protect public's health, do impose a public safety hazard. So he says here that one key hallmark of the FDA regulations is that as of August 8th, 2016, no new vaping products will be allowed on the market because the FDA considers virtually any change in a product to constitute a new product. That means that the deeming regulations will essentially freeze the vaping market as it exists on August 8th. And from that date forward, not only will companies not be able to introduce new products, but they'll also be unable to make changes in their existing products. And these regulations will discourage companies from undertaking any revisions to their products. Most importantly, critical safety improvements that may be necessary to address reported safety hazards. Even small changes in products won't be allowed. For example, changes to the battery won't be allowed, any ingredients in the e-liquid. You can't even change the label on a bottle. And that even includes if you want to change your supplier of one of those ingredients. For example, say you use propylene glycol in your e-juice? What if your supplier goes out of business? Or what if you find out that they're manufacturing an unsafe version of PG? You can't change it. So what the FDA is doing here is far from protecting the public's health. They're actually putting the public safety at great risk. And Dr. Siegel says that he can think of no other consumer product manufacturer that is prohibited by federal regulators from introducing critical safety improvements to its products. And he says that the most nonsensical aspect of these regulations is the way they protect the sales of the real tobacco cigarettes that are killing hundreds of thousands of Americans every year. Because while tens of thousands of vaping products will be required to submit these applications, cigarette manufacturers like the makers of Marlboro, Camel, Newports, and Kools, they don't have to do anything. The FDA has grandfathered these products in, meaning that they can continue to market without having to spend one dime on an application to stay in the market. So really, the FDA could have done no greater favor to the continued profits of manufacturers of tobacco cigarettes. So it's really a great article from Dr. Siegel, and he makes a lot of great points in there. All right, so let's move on to probably one of the biggest stories in the last couple of weeks. So Pennsylvania passed a 40% tax on e-cigarettes and liquids. If you look at that new tax bill, you'll see that this isn't just for e-cigarettes. They're what they're trying to do is recover revenue for their pretty much failed economy. So in this bill, they're increasing taxes for things like cigarettes, e-cigarettes, smokeless tobacco, lottery winnings, internet gaming, liquor revenue, and they're even taxing digital downloads for books, music, satellite radio, and streaming video and audio, things like Netflix and Spotify. It's crazy. But all of those things, the taxes are increasing, which sucks, but none of them are nearly as bad as what they're doing to vaping with that 40% tax. So vaping360.com, they put out an article about this tax saying that it's worse than they originally thought. This is another great article from Jim McDonald. He points out here that Pennsylvania vapors could go to prison for buying vapor products online and if they don't pay that 40% tax. The penalties for evading the tax include up to a $5,000 fine or prison time not to exceed 5 years. It's even illegal to merely possess these products if they're bought in another state. Section 1207-A of the law criminalizes the ownership of any vape device or e-liquid that wasn't bought from a licensed Pennsylvania seller. So if you buy a mod on a trip to New Jersey or Ohio, merely having it in your possession will make you a criminal after October 1st. And Alex Clark of CASA, he's noted that the bill defines consumers as unclassified importers. So that means anyone, a consumer who purchased a vape product from a vendor who hasn't already paid that tax would be responsible to pay the state based on retail price. Buyers will now be required to file reports and make payments monthly, just like vape shops would have to do. Online sellers outside of Pennsylvania, they have the choice on whether or not they want to pay that 40% tax. Most likely they're not going to. So a lot of that burden is now going to be on the consumers in Pennsylvania. Another really interesting thing of this new law is that there's a floor tax that requires vendors to pay on existing stock. So anything that they have in their shop, when the law goes into effect on October 1st, they have to pay 40% on all of that existing inventory. That's pretty much going to put all of these shops out of business. I don't think any vaping shops are really going to exist after this bill goes into effect. So if you live in Pennsylvania, you absolutely need to be writing your state legislators, senator, and governor. CASA just issued a call to action, and their site will automatically direct you to the correct legislators you need to contact. So go to CASA.org, find that call to action, and take action on it right away. If you look at some of the comments in this thread, you'll also see that a lot of people are saying things like, there's no way that the government is going to be able to figure all of this out, that the government has better things to do than to go after these companies. But that is absolutely not true, because the government has employees who are paid to do this kind of thing, or they contract with other companies to do it for them. They're going to request invoices and receipts, and they're going to go back and look at anyone who lives in Pennsylvania who has purchased from them, and they're going to go back and find those people. And this actually happened before when New York City enforced a cigarette tax similar to this one. They actually went back, found people who hadn't paid the taxes, and requested that money back. Some people have even had to go back and pay the government $10,000. I think Mike Vapes, he was on a show recently where he talked about he was one of those people who he was purchasing out of state to save money, and then at the end of the year, as a surprise to him, sent him a bill of how much taxes he owed them, and he said it was something like $8,000. So yeah, it's not a joke. They will find out who you are, I guess, unless you pay with cash. But then if you're paying with cash, you're going to have to live close enough to state lines to where you can actually go out of state and purchase electronic cigarettes. But most people aren't going to have that ability, and if you do cross state lines, you risk that chance of getting pulled over by police officers waiting to catch people bringing stuff into state, That's not unheard of. I can't believe what they're doing in Pennsylvania. They're pretty much just killing the industry there and killing smokers, people who want to quit smoking. All right, now I want to talk about another thing here. A group of Oklahoma vendors led by Rob Reagan of Vapor Kings and Jennifer Burton of Vape This have made the first anti-deeming TV commercial. This commercial was designed to run both on local TV and radio. It's 30 seconds long, so I'm going to play it real quick.
The FDA's new deeming regulations will eliminate 99% of the vapor products currently on the American market. These regulations ignore science, are harmful to public health, and are tailored to the deep pockets of big tobacco. Small businesses created our vapor industry. We want fair regulations, fair safety standards, and to maintain the variety of vapor products that big tobacco will not offer. We all know a smoker. Prohibition of vapor products does not protect public health. Help now at august8th.org.
So a great commercial, and these guys, they're so committed to fighting the FDA that they're offering this commercial for free to businesses in other areas of the United States. They'll even modify the ending to list your local shops that have participated in the airing. If you are serious about running the ad, you can contact Reagan directly for the link to download it. And if you can, you should share this with your friends and family. Tell all the vape shops you visit. If you're a shop owner, you can play it on your TVs in the shop. Just share it everywhere you can, in the social media and forums, everywhere. All right, and then I came across this article on Reddit. It says what to expect after August 8th. If you look into the comments section here of this Reddit thread, you'll see someone, a Reddit user named Vaping at 50, he compiled a large PDF, an overview that he made for shops in Colorado last week. This isn't just for Colorado, this will be for anybody. But his PDF is very thorough. It has pretty much everything that a shop owner needs to know. So one of the first things that shop owners need to know is that as of July 26th, the Child Nicotine Poison Prevention Act of 2015 goes into effect. That means all e-liquid in your store must comply with the new law. You will need a general certificate of conformity from every manufacturer or distributor for every brand of e-liquid that you stock. It was originally thought that any e-liquid that was on your shelf made prior to July 26th would be safe, but upon further legal analysis, the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission sent out a letter saying that that's no longer the case. It applies to any existing inventory on your shelf as of that date, July 26th. So for any non-compliant containers, you won't be able to sell that. All right, and the next thing to note here is that on August 8th, the FDA regulations go into effect. So that means no new products may enter the market unless you register as a tobacco manufacturer, and you also can't make changes to your products like I mentioned earlier in the show. That means you can't mix e-liquid, you can't add nicotine to existing e-liquid products. So if your shop sells 0 milligram nicotine e-juice, you can't add nicotine. You can't build coils, you can't replace coils or atomizers, you can't assemble a device for a customer, and you can't repair a device. You also can't allow free sampling. For samples, you have to charge a non-meaningless amount. So people were saying before, charge a penny. Well, that doesn't work. It has to be a non-meaningless amount. You also can't create a sampling club or a membership. Businesses will no longer be able to give away products during promotions or events. If you sell online via e-commerce, you must use a true age verification system. For example, Veritad, EVS, LexisNexis, or Blue Check. You must see a photo ID of anyone under the age of 27. You may not make false or misleading claims about vaping, and you may not state that vaping is safer than smoking, helps people quit smoking, or is a tobacco harm reduction. But your customers can say those things, and that's just federal level regulation. Some states have much stricter laws. So if you run a vape business, keep that in mind. Well, that's a lot of FDA regulation type stuff. I need a break already. So, vape break. I'm vaping on Pebbles Donuts from marinavape.com. Really good stuff. It's supposed to be like a glazed donut with fruity pebbles. I don't really get the glazed donut flavor out of it, but it's really good. But it's really sweet. All right, let's get back to it. All right, so now let's talk about some science and research stuff. So this first article I want to talk about is on vaping360.com. It's titled, New Study Says Vaping Can Save Many Lives. So according to this new study published in the journal Nicotine and Tobacco Research, vaping could lead to a massive 21% decline in smoking-related death in the generation born after 1997. The study was conducted by a team of respected tobacco control experts led by David Levy, PhD, a professor of oncology at Georgetown Lombardi Comprehensive Cancer Center. According according to David Levy, the study shows that recent claims by some scientists that e-cigarettes are likely to act as a gateway to the use of tobacco products are overstated. So this study models patterns of use from national data, and it even takes into account some young people who have never smoked and who have adopted vaping, and finds that e-cigs still have a benefit to overall public health. The researchers found that even if e-cigarettes were as much as 25% as harmful as smoking, there would still be an overall health gain. Levy said, "Our study indicates that, considering a broad range of reasonable scenarios, e-cigarettes are likely to reduce cigarette smoking and not lead to offsetting increases in harm from the use of e-cigarettes." So great news there. And then another study I want to talk about was something I came across on eurekalert.org. So this one is titled, "New Clinical Study Shows Exclusive E-Cigarette Use Reduces Exposure to Harmful Chemicals, Similar to Complete Smoking Cessation." So this was reported in the Journal of Toxicology Mechanisms and Methods. And in the study, they measured the changes in 15 biomarkers of exposure to harmful and potentially harmful constituents, shortened to HPHCs. So they tested for these HPHCs in the urine, blood, and exhaled breath of 105 adult smokers during a 5-day controlled trial. They split the participants into 3 groups. The first group abstained completely from tobacco and vaping. The second group used electronic cigarettes exclusively, and the third group used both electronic cigarettes and their usual brand of tobacco cigarettes. In 8 of the 9 urinary biomarkers they tested, the reductions in levels of these HPHCs following the use of electronic cigarettes were almost indistinguishable from reductions in smokers who stopped altogether during the same time. In the blood of both e-cigarette users and smokers who quit, levels of carbon monoxide were reduced by over 75%. The levels of volatile organic compounds such as acrolein, benzene, and 1,3-butadiene were reduced by over 80% in both groups. And similarly, levels of tobacco-specific nitrosamines were reduced by 66 to 98% in the cessation group and 62 to 93% in the e-cigarette group. So very, very close to complete abstinence from tobacco. When it came to the dual-use group, they also saw reductions in exposure to HPHCs. So very promising results from that study, even for dual users. All right, and then there was this article that I came across on yahoo.com. This is on the West Australian section of Yahoo News. This one was titled, "Anti-Smoking Zealots Miss Vaping Benefits." So a lot of this is things that I've already talked about in this show and in other shows, so I'm not going to go through all of that, but there's this interesting quote at the bottom of this article that I really liked and I wanted to share. This was from Public Health England, and they actually made this statement in another article I talked about in a couple of shows back, and I must have just missed it. But anyway, it says, "There is no circumstance in which it is better for a smoker to continue smoking, a habit that kills 1 in every 2 and harms many others." And that's just such a really good statement, because you have all of these anti-tobacco groups who are trying to ban vaping while not really doing a whole lot to ban tobacco smoking, when we know that tobacco kills people and we don't know that vaping does anything. Yet they're trying to take these products away from people, even despite not knowing that this could be saving millions of lives. All right, so let's get into some other news. So Public Health England, they just released their new framework advice for businesses and employers to help them create their own policies on the use of electronic cigarettes. They have 5 recommendations here, all with their own bullet points. The first one here is make clear the distinction between vaping and smoking. They point out that based on international peer-reviewed evidence, e-cigarettes carry a fraction of the risk of cigarettes and have the potential to drive down smoking rates and improve public health. So business policies should make clear the distinction between vaping and smoking. They recommend not using smoking terminology when referring to e-cigarettes. The second recommendation they make here is that businesses need to ensure policies are informed by the evidence on health risks to bystanders. Again, they mention that international peer-reviewed evidence show that the risk to health of bystanders from exposure to e-cigarettes is extremely low. So in policy development, businesses should not include vaping in their requirements of their organization's smoke-free policy. There also needs to be considerations for people who might consider the vapor to be a nuisance or a distraction for people nearby. So it could be useful for businesses to provide etiquette guidelines for vapors. Bullet point number 3, identify and manage risks of uptake by children and young people. And when developing policies on e-cigarette use in child and youth settings, it's appropriate to guard against potential youth uptake while balancing this with the need to foster an environment where it's easier for adults to not smoke. So in these cases, you should treat e-cigarettes as you would any other age-restricted product, and to consider ways to make it easier for adults to vape in these settings. All right, bullet point number 4, support smokers to stop smoking and staying smoke-free. One really important thing they mention here is that vapers should not be required to use the same space as smokers because this could undermine their ability to quit smoking. They also mention that vaping provides a generally lower blood nicotine level than smoking, and it can take a little bit longer to reach the desired level, so that needs to be taken into account too, that vapers might need more breaks or longer breaks. All right, and the last one here is Number 5, support compliance with smoke-free law and policies. So they say that managers need to indicate accurately where vaping is permitted or prohibited and communicate the policy clearly to everyone it affects. This could be by the use of signs in certain areas. So it's very cool that Public Health England is taking this stance on electronic cigarettes and really trying to get businesses on board with recognizing the differences between smoking and vaping. I hope a lot of businesses actually take this into account when they're creating policies, because it would be great to have a workplace where you don't have to vape in the smoking section, because you know, especially for someone who is just getting started with vaping, they go into the smoking section and they're going to smell that cigarette smoke and they're just going to be tempted to smoke. Okay, and now I want to talk about, I saw this on Phil Basardo's website, tasteyourjuice.com. He just posted it's a flyer for a documentary called Beyond the Cloud. This was put together by Ghislaine Armand and Sebastian Dujemdan. Sorry if I butchered those names. But anyway, they put together a documentary called Beyond the Cloud. The documentary will be online on September 25th, 26th, and 27th on Vape Expo's YouTube channel. It's going to be the full video and freely available. So set a reminder to watch that. Share it online so other people know. There's been a lot of really good vaping documentaries lately. I can't wait to see this one. All right, now let's get into the tips and tricks section of the show. So this first one I want to talk about is titled 8 Ways Nicotine Increases Heartburn. So I hate to share negative things about vaping, but you know, sometimes I think it needs to be shared. And for anyone suffering things like acid reflux or heartburn, it would be useful for them to know that it could be exacerbated by nicotine. And this includes any nicotine product. This is tobacco, chew tobacco, nicotine gum, patches, or electronic cigarettes. So there are 8 reasons here. So I'm just going to go through those. The number 1 here is relaxation of the lower esophageal sphincter. That's the valve at the base of the esophagus that closes to keep the stomach contents in place. Nicotine relaxes the LES and allows stomach acid to leak back into the esophagus, causing heartburn. Number 2, smoker's cough. So this wouldn't be entirely relevant to vaping, maybe more so in the beginning, you know, the first couple of weeks when you start vaping, because you do get a cough until you adjust to it, and then the cough pretty much goes away entirely. But that cough causes the diaphragm to contract, which places pressure on the stomach and its contents, pushing food upwards and adding pressure on the LES, which can add to more acid reflux. Number 3 here, inflammation of the esophagus. So nicotine contact in the esophagus can cause irritation and inflammation, making the esophagus more sensitive to stomach acid, which can reflux. Number 4, damage to the esophagus. So nicotine damages the mucous membrane that helps protect the esophageal lining from stomach acid, and that in turn makes damage from acid reflux more likely. Number 5, lower saliva production. So nicotine lowers saliva production, which raises heartburn risk. Saliva has a natural antacid in it that helps alkalize stomach acid both in the stomach and what might reflux back into the esophagus. Number 6, changes to stomach acid. So nicotine increases stomach acid production and can also cause bile salts to move from the intestine to the stomach, making stomach acids more intense. And number 7, slower digestion. Nicotine causes a slowing in the digestive process, which causes more stomach acids to be produced and an increased risk of food pressure on the LES, leading to acid reflux. And then number 8 here was cancer, but obviously that's not relevant to electronic cigarettes. That one is entirely about smoking tobacco. So yeah, nothing serious, but if you do suffer from things like acid reflux or heartburn, just keep in mind that the nicotine could be making it a little bit worse. If you're a smoker using electronic cigarettes to stay off of tobacco cigarettes, then it's really no different than that. But I think it's probably incentive to eventually wean yourself off of all nicotine and just quit entirely, if that's an issue that really causes a big problem in your life. Fortunately though, for vapors, we have access to 0 milligram nicotine e-juice. So, you know, if nicotine is causing you problems, you can just switch to 0 milligram nicotine. All right, and now I want to talk about Omegeddon e-liquid. So I haven't tried this, but a lot of reviewers are getting it and everyone is saying how good it is. Well, now they came out with a new line called Duck Pond e-liquid, and something I noticed about this as I was browsing their site, they have a new e-juice called My Jarums. So this is supposed to be like Jarum Blacks, clove cigarettes, and I've seen many threads of people asking for an e-juice that tastes like Jarums, and there doesn't seem to be really any on the market. There might be a couple, but a lot of people say that it doesn't taste like Jarums, but close enough usually, I guess. But anyway, I don't know if people are saying anything about my Jarums from Omegaton e-liquid, but if you do like those Jarum Black clove cigarettes, then I recommend giving this one a shot. When I was a smoker, I actually used to love Jarums. I didn't smoke them all the time, but I did like them. You know, I'd go through maybe 2 packs a year, if that. But yeah, they were they were one of my favorite clove cigarettes, and I've always been interested in trying a Jarum or a clove e-juice. So if you do give this one a shot, let me know what you think, because I'd be really interested in trying it out. They sell it in nicotine levels of 0, 3, and 6, and you get a 30 ml bottle. It's a 70-30 ratio PG of VG-PG, and it'll cost $15.99. All right, now let's talk about some DIY stuff. So I came across this article or this thread on Reddit. It's titled Safe Disposal of Nicotine Base. So this person needs to dispose of an almost full bottle of 200 mils of 72 milligram nicotine. He asks what's the safest way to dispose of it. The top comment here is from Mr. Tinkles. He's an environmental health specialist. He says the best way is to take it to a household hazardous waste disposal site. Most towns have one. You could just need to Google for it. And they employ chemists that can dispose of it. He also mentions here that most people just dump it in the sink. I've seen other people make this recommendation too, that it's really not that bad. But there are local laws in some places that would consider nicotine a hazardous waste. So you could be breaking the law if you do that. This guy, he mentions here that chances are by the time it gets to the treatment plant, it'll be diluted to almost nothing by the sanitary sewers. So it's probably not a huge problem if you do decide to dump it in the sink, but preferably take it to a hazardous waste disposal site. There was another comment here from someone who says he used to work for the dump in his city, and every Sunday they would accept hazardous goods to be disposed of properly. So that's also worth checking out. Call up your local dump and see if they take hazardous waste certain times of the year. And then another person here mentioned that some chemistry or biology programs in universities have hazardous waste programs in place. So you could contact your local university and see if they can do it for you. Okay, and now I came across this thread on vapingunderground.com. This one is a recipe for Oreo McFlurry. I just wanted to mention this one because I love Oreo McFlurries. I don't eat at McDonald's often at all, maybe once a year. I cook a lot. I love cooking. I grew up in a family that cooks, so I like to eat, real hearty, healthy foods. But anyway, when I do go to McDonald's, I like to get an Oreo McFlurry or sometimes a vanilla milkshake, but I love Oreo McFlurries and I really want to try this recipe out. So I'm just going to give you the ingredients here. You'll need 7% real flavors cookies and cream, 6% Liquid Barn vanilla ice cream, 3% the Perfumer's Apprentice Bavarian cream, 1% the Perfumer's Apprentice sweet cream, 2% Flavor Arts Vienna cream, and 1% I&W's Shisha vanilla. So 6 ingredients and you have yourself an Oreo McFlurry. I really hope that it tastes like it because I'd feel much better about vaping Oreo McFlurry than eating one. All right, moving on. So this next topic I want to talk about is a thread on Reddit titled, I would like to compile a list of ways to take the harshness out of fruits. So this person has noticed that a lot of people have reactions, whether throat, mouth, or lung, when fruits are used in e-juice. And that's something that I've actually never experienced, but I did learn from one of my subscribers, Rubik's Cube. He mentioned in a comment on one of my videos a while back that he gets harshness out of fruit flavors. I never realized that was a problem, but yeah, I guess it is. Anyway, this person asks for tips on how to take the harshness out or at least reduce it. So the recommendations that came out of this thread were, well, the top one was to steep it. That was the most recommended solution, just letting it steep for a while. That usually gets rid of a lot of the harshness. Another one was to use additives like cactus at 0.25 to 1%, but one of the drawbacks of using cactus is that at higher volumes, or even to people who are very sensitive to it, lower volumes, it could yield a sock flavor or a soap flavor. But from what I've heard, most people don't seem to have a problem with cactus, and a lot of people love that flavor. Another additive would be ethyl maltol at 0.25 to 1%. But another thing to keep in mind with that one is if you use too much, you could mute the flavor. You can use Pures, spelled Pyure, stevia, or Flavor Arts MTS, which stands for mellow, thick, and smooth. Both of those can be used at 0.25 to 0.5%. Another side effect of those would be muting the flavor if you use too much. Something else to reduce harshness would be to avoid e-juices that contain linalool, which is contained in e-juices like TFA's Juicy Peach, which is one that always comes up in these discussions about harsh fruit flavors. That one is a big offender. If it's really bothering you, you could replace those flavors with other similar flavors. For example, the TFA's Juicy Peach, you might try something like INW's Peach or FLV's Peach. They might not have the same exact flavor, but it might do the job and won't have the same harshness. Something else to keep in mind is that using lower amounts of these flavors, these concentrates, can still bring a lot of flavor to your e-juice, but then the reduced amount will have lower harshness. And something that a lot of people recommend is to use creams. And that's why you'll find in a lot of fruit flavored e-juices that they often have a creamy flavor, because the makers of those e-juices are using creams to bring down the harshness. That could change the flavor quite a bit, but if harshness is really bothering you, then you might as well add a cream to it. There was some other tips in here too, like using marshmallow in low percentages can soften harsh flavors like TFA Juicy Peach. And another person responded to that one saying that he likes to use marshmallow because some creams and custards are just too much for him. So he likes the fullness that marshmallow gives and the fact that it isn't too sweet or cheesy. So that's also something worth trying. So good tips there for any of you DIYers out there wanting to vape fruit flavored e-juices but don't like them because of the harshness. I think that could also be a good tip for anyone who doesn't DIY necessarily, but who has purchased some fruit flavors, getting a really harsh throat hit. You could purchase one of these additives, like a cream or marshmallow, cactus, and just add a couple drops. Use an e-juice calculator to figure out how many drops you need to add. And then that might make that fruit flavored e-juice vapeable for you. All right, moving on. Here's another thread on Reddit. This one was titled Flavora Announcement. So this person said that he found a post on Facebook that was shared in one of the juice mixing groups that he's in. According to this Facebook post, Flavora made an announcement saying that they want to help commercial customers make the best recipes possible before the FDA deeming deadline on August 8th. So to do that, they're offering nearly free samples in order to push as many Flavora flavorings into their hands as possible before that date. So if you're a wholesale customer, and I've seen people in this thread saying that they just signed up to get a wholesale account and were approved in like 5 minutes. So you can do that. I believe you might need a tax ID, but I saw another person saying that they didn't need a tax ID. They just had to contact Flavora and they pushed the account through. But anyway, once you have a wholesale account set up, you can log into that and then go to store.flavora.com/deeming-promo and you'll be able to purchase $1 samples in 15 ml size bottles. They'll also rush these samples to make sure that you get them in time before those deeming regulations. So that might be too late for a lot of you out there, because you only have a couple of weeks before these regulations go into effect. That's not a lot of time to come up with recipes, but maybe if you've been sitting on some recipes, go get some of these flavorings real quick, put them together, put them on the market. That's another thing I don't know. Like, what's officially considered putting them on the market? And then if you're not interested in creating your own line or whatever, maybe you can just create a wholesale account and get a bunch of cheap flavors. Okay, so that's all I got for you for this episode. So you'll find the show notes for this one on VapePassion.com, episode 26. If you want to support the show, consider donating to my Patreon page at patreon.com/VapePassion. You can donate $1 a month. That helps. You can follow me on Twitter at VapePassion. I'm also on Facebook. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can subscribe to the show on iTunes or Stitcher, the podcast version. And if you're listening to the podcast, you can watch this with video examples, images, and things like that on my YouTube channel. I also put out a weekly newsletter. It's just updates of things I'm doing. Usually it's an update letting you know when this show is released and any reviews I'm doing. So just a once a week newsletter. If you want to be notified of things, you can go to my website to get on that list. And like always, if you have any questions or comments, just feel free to email me at alex@vapepassion.com or just comment on one of my videos. All right, so I hope to see you again next week.